Hi, this is Mary from the Daily Sew. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a small bust adjustment. You need a small bust adjustment when there's just too much fabric, it's way too loose, just in the bust area, everywhere else fits fine. And I'm going to show you how to do this small bust adjustment on a garment that has a dart and on a garment that has no dart. This video is part of a series of how to get a better fit. So if you're ready, let's go. So when do you do a small bust adjustment? Well, you've made a garment and it's just too big in the bust. It fits everywhere else, but in the bust you might see some puddling vertically of fabric, some like bubbling up, or sometimes just horizontally. You just have too much in the bust area, too much fabric. Everywhere else the garment fits fine, but that bust is just not laying against the garment flat. It's just too much fabric there. So maybe you haven't sewn a test garment yet, but this is a common problem you have. Or you know that the difference between your high bust and your full bust are different than what the pattern has been drafted for. If you've seen my video about how to choose the right size pattern, you know that you're going to pick a pattern based on your high bust measurement and not your full bust measurement. And this is going to fit you much better in the upper chest and shoulders, but it's going to leave a pattern that might be too big across the chest. Sometimes a simple repositioning of the bust where it is located or how close or how far away from the apex will make a huge difference in how the fit of the garment is, especially depending on how much design ease is built into the garment. So start with taking your high bust measurement and your full bust measurement. Watch my video, get the right fit for how to take these measurements accurately. The difference between your high bust and your full bust tells you what pattern cup size you are. Forget about bra cup size, this is not the same. In pattern drafting, the cup size is going to refer to the difference in inches between the high bust measurement and the full bust measurement. So if you have a 1-inch difference, you are a pattern A cup. If you have a 2-inch difference, you are a pattern B cup. 3-inch difference equals a pattern C cup, and so on. So what cup size is the pattern drafted for? Well, most companies will tell you on their website, if not the pattern, what they've drafted for. So Vogue, Buttrick, McCall's, and Simplicity all draft for a 2-inch difference, or a B cup, between the high bust and the full bust. If you have a 1-inch difference and your pattern was drafted for a 2-inch difference, you'll already know that you need to remove 1 inch from the bust. So another way to find out if the pattern is going to fit you is to take your body measurements plus your desired amount of ease and compare that to the flat pattern or the finished garment measurements should the pattern provide them. A lot of patterns do now. So what do I mean by ease? The minimum ease, also known as wearing ease, is the amount of fabric beyond the body measurements added to the style of the pattern in order for you to move in the garment. And then there is additional ease, design ease, that is added to make the styles, like a swing top or an oversized t-shirt. It goes way beyond the body measurements and what you need to move in it. And the amount of wearing ease, that minimum ease, is going to depend on the type of fabric that the design is meant for. So thicker fabrics need more wearing ease, and garments that are made to go over layers, like coats and blazers, also will have a little bit more ease in order to accommodate the layers underneath the garment. Here's a guide for minimum bust ease. For blouses, dresses, jumpsuits, 2.5 to 3 inches or 6.5 to 7.5 centimeters. Unlined jacket, 3 to 4 inches or 7.5 to 10 centimeters. Lined jacket, 3.5 to 4.5 inches or 9 to 11.5 centimeters. Coats, 4 to 5 inches or 10 to 12.5 centimeters. So know what amount of ease that you need or you want, and add that to your body measurement. Compare against the finished garment measurements if the pattern provides them. If not, write them down and we're going to measure the pattern. The bust apex is where the bust is the fullest. A pattern has a bust apex, as does your body. And on a well-made pattern, a well-drafted pattern, the apex is marked. It should circle with a little cross in it. And when you want a good fit, it's ideal if the pattern's bust apex and your bust apex line up. They're in the same location. If you have a tissue pattern, this is pretty easy to check. You can lay the tissue against your body, mind where the seam allowances, center, front, and all that are, so that you have it in the right place. This one's pretty close, so I wouldn't change it. If it's more than a 1/2 inch away, you'd want to change it, but this one is almost spot on. I think that's the fullest. And that's how you would do it if you have a tissue pattern. Another way you could do it is to measure down from mid-shoulder to the fullest point. Note that amount. And then measure from the fullest point over to the fullest point. And make a note of that. You can then measure your pattern and see where your apex is on the flat pattern. Measure down from shoulder to bust apex area on the pattern if it's marked. If it's not marked, the dart will be pointing to that apex, but it'll be at least 1 inch away. Remember to skip over the seam allowance when you're measuring. Measure the distance that you got from your shoulder to your apex and make a mark on the pattern. Then measure over from the center front 1/2 of your apex to apex distance. So remember to measure from center front, which is not always the edge of the pattern piece. Make a mark. Where the two marks meet, this is your apex location. And you can tell right away here if you're going to need to raise or lower your bust dart, and that is a different video. You should raise or lower the pattern's apex before you do any bust adjustment. So this mark is going to be very helpful. Then you're going to measure across the pattern at the bust apex level, and it can be helpful to fold out the dart. When measuring, make sure to exclude the seam allowance. Double this amount for the width of the complete front. Add the width of the back pattern pieces to this. Compare the pattern measurements to your body measurements plus the desired ease. How much do you want to take out of the pattern? If you sewed a test garment, put it on and get some pins. And you're going to pin it out evenly over the bust until all the excess is out, until you have a nice fit. Now don't overfit it. Don't make it so tight you can't move underneath the garment. And also when you pin, you want to be aware that your center front still stays center front and that your side seams still stay on the side, that they are not being pulled forward, because you may have a narrow back, but that's a whole different fitting. Measure the amount pinched out on both sides. Remember, whatever depth of the pinch you measure, you'll double it to get the total amount that you've pinched out. And both sides of the garment give you the total taken out across the front. You're going to add the amount taken out and then divide it to get the average. This is in case you pinned out more from one side than the other. If you get an amount not evenly divided by 2 like I did, you can decide if you want the fit to be tighter or looser. And once you know how much you want to reduce the bust, it's time to do the adjustment. How to do a small bust adjustment on a bodice with a bust dart. You have your pattern or a copy of it. Your apex is marked. Take a ruler and draw a line parallel to the grain line from the waist or hem up to the apex. Then draw a line from the apex to somewhere in the lower third of the armhole, somewhere in that section. It doesn't have to be precise. Draw a line through the middle of the dart to the apex. Now, if your apex is not in the same location as the pattern's apex, your line may not go through the center of the dart tip. Now draw a line perpendicular to the grain line from the edge closest to the center front to the first line you drew. The exact height is flexible, but somewhere near the waist seam or the hem. Get some scissors and cut on the line from the waist to the apex. Turn at the apex and cut along the line to the armhole to but not through. Stop before the edge. You're going to leave a little hinge of paper there. Cut on the third line from the center of the dart to the apex, but again stop short and leave a little hinge. Then cut across the center on your horizontal line. This time cut it off completely, but don't lose that piece. You're going to slip a piece of paper under the open part of the pattern. Now, by how much do you need to reduce the bust area? You'll overlap the side part of the pattern and the front part of the pattern. You're going to overlap those by half the total amount you need taken out of the pattern. So you're going to reduce the pattern only by half of what you need total, because this pattern here, it only represents half of the front bodice. Right? You're going to cut out 2 of these, or you're going to cut out 1 on the fold, and together they will have the total amount you need to be taken out. So start at the apex and measure that amount, whatever half that total amount is, and mark that amount so that it's parallel to the grain line. Place the side part of the pattern piece over the center part of the pattern to meet the mark. The marked line ensures that the overlapped edges are parallel and equal distance apart the entire way down. Tape this down. If the center front was still attached, the pattern would be way off because in overlapping, we've raised the waistline. You don't need all that extra fabric to go over the bust, so now it's gone, but we have to make the center of the pattern match the side of the pattern. So we simply overlap that loose piece so it lines up at the waist or hem and tape it down. The width at the waist has also become smaller with this reduction. If you need that extra room in the waist, just add it back in to the lower side seam. You can add the amount you overlap the pattern here to the front, or you can add half of the amount you need to the front piece and the other half to the back pattern's lower side seam. Doesn't matter. Let me cut out this dart on the leg so you can actually see it. The dart has automatically reduced itself by a lot in this case. All bust darts, regardless of size, should point to the apex. Our apex is still in the same position, but too far away from the apex. So we have to redraw the dart. Get it to pointing to the apex and get it closer. A smaller bust dart will end about 3/4 or an inch away from the apex. First, let's figure out where the dart ends. Place your ruler in the center of the base of the dart and go toward the apex. Measure back from the apex, they're 3/4 to 1 inch, where the new dart tip will be, where the dart legs will end. The dart legs are now closer together, they're supposed to be, but just draw them in from the base to the new dart point. Fold the dart by bringing the lower leg up to meet the upper leg. True the seam at the dart base by taking half the difference away from the larger side and adding half the difference to the smaller side. You want to keep these lines smooth. They blend into and come smoothly off of the original lines. Cut across the side seam with the dart folded to get the shape of the new dart. Check that the back pattern piece is the same length as the front along the side seam. You line up the side seam notch and walk the pattern pieces together, jumping over the dart. And unlike what I'm demonstrating here, you want to match the seam line and not the cut line. How to do a small bust adjustment on a bodice without a dart. A bodice without a dart can use the simpler pivot method. Just trace your pattern onto another piece of paper, just the outline here, and mark your seam line at the shoulder armhole area there, the seam allowance, so you know where the seam line is. Also mark how much you need to reduce the pattern by. You measure inward at the armhole/side seam, half the amount you need to reduce from the bust, and you mark it on the paper there. Line the pattern back up with the tracing. Using a pencil tip or an awl, hold the pattern down at the intersection of the armhole shoulder seam. Swing the pattern in until the underarm hits your mark, the amount you want to reduce it by. Hold the pattern still and retrace the pattern at the armhole to get the new armhole. Now, move your pencil or awl down to the pattern's armhole/side seam intersection and pivot the pattern back so that the side seam meets the original seam at the waist. And you retrace the pattern's side seam. This is your new pattern. You've reduced it only at the bust level where the reduction was needed. You've kept it the same at the waist. That's easy, right? But the side seam may need to be raised at the waist back to its original length. And to do that, to check, you're going to check against the back bodice pattern piece on the side seam. Well, I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below and I'll be sure to reply. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.